On October 12th of 1979, an Indiana police patrolman named Raymond Brunk was taking a coffee break at a diner on West Washington Street in Indianapolis. It was 2 a.m., so Raymond wasn't expecting anything crazy to happen. Most of the city was still sleeping, so there was very little chance that his break would take any wild turns. Unfortunately, Raymond's coffee break was interrupted when 24-year-old Kathy Williams burst into the diner and frantically explained that her friend, 23-year-old Sheila Sandy Davis, had been murdered. Raymond communicated the information to dispatch and then responded to the scene of the crime, which had occurred in room 126 at the Travelodge West Motel. Sheila's body was face down and completely nude. Her legs were bound with a clothesline and her hands had been tied behind her back with a gold-colored rope, but Kathy told the authorities that she had untied the rope after entering the room. Kathy hadn't realized that her friend was dead yet, but her actions had unfortunately tainted the evidence. Sheila's body was confiscated and an autopsy was performed, which revealed that the killer had slit her throat. According to the medical examiner, the killer had most likely used a straight razor with a nicked edge. There was also evidence that the killer had attempted to cut Sheila's throat multiple times before the successful wound. The same blade that had been used to open her throat had also been used to cut off a portion of her left breast. However, the cause of death was asphyxiation. The authorities found Sheila's black dress on the floor of the motel room near her body, and the dress was torn in several places, suggesting that the killer had forcibly removed it. Investigators also found Sheila's purse, which had been emptied onto the bed. They were unable to determine whether or not any items had been stolen. Detectives began investigating Sheila's background to find any clues as to who may have wanted her dead. As it turned out, Sheila was a full-time sex worker who mainly operated out of a gentleman's club called the Red Garter Lounge. According to arrest records, Sheila had been arrested 1 year prior to her murder for soliciting an undercover police officer. She was last seen at the Red Garter Lounge shortly after midnight on the morning of her murder, and she had been witnessed leaving the establishment with a white man who was described as approximately 6 feet tall, with a muscular build and a pockmarked face. This man had also allegedly been carrying a knife at the time. The police interviewed numerous customers from the club, and some of them claimed that the unknown man was rumored to be a professional wrestler, but nobody was able to provide a name, so the man was never identified or located. After interviewing Sheila's associates, the police learned that she had become much more cautious after her arrest, allegedly accepting clients if and only if they either had previous dealings with her or they could be vouched for by other sex workers. These associates also told the police that Sheila kept her payments under a hairpiece, but it's unclear whether or not the authorities ever confiscated any such funds. The investigation into Sheila's murder eventually petered out and the case went cold, with no new information coming in and none of the leads panning out. Sheila was laid to rest in New Crown Cemetery, and her obituary was very brief, only mentioning that she was born in Texas and was survived by her parents and 6 siblings. She had also been married at one point, but had long since been divorced. The murder of Sheila Davis remains unsolved to this day, and it doesn't seem likely that this will ever change. On January 14th of 2016, a person or people approached the home of a married couple on Uther Street in Detroit and violently assaulted the husband, Jim McKeogh, in his own garage. Jim had just finished clearing the snow from his driveway and the sidewalk around his house, and he wasn't expecting anything violent to happen. The beating was seemingly random and unprovoked. After assaulting Jim, the perpetrator or perpetrators entered the house and attacked his wife, Christy, who attempted to run out of the front door but didn't quite make it. The next day, Christy failed to show up for work at her family's tech manufacturing company, and she wasn't answering her phone either. Her brothers were very concerned for her well-being, so they went to her house to check in. This is where they found the dead bodies of both Christy and Jim. They contacted the authorities immediately, and an investigation began. The McKeogh's house was only 50 yards away from a strip mall, which had security cameras facing the house. In a frustrating turn of events, those cameras were on the view setting instead of the record setting, which means that the footage of the double murder had been automatically deleted. The police discovered that the only item missing from the house was Christy's cell phone, and they managed to get her phone records with a subpoena. This allowed them to narrow down the time of death, but it didn't really help much with the investigation. There was also no apparent motive for the double homicide. According to their family members, the couple was loved by everyone. Christy's brother, Rahul, stated that this is the most confusing and senseless crime. We have no motive. We have no anything. They were the most generous, honest, loved, beautiful, caring people. They opened their hearts, wallets, and home to anyone who needed it. Christy's family posted a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person or people responsible for the double murder. The lead detective on the case, Joe Burns, stated that this particular murder is the most violent that he's ever worked on. The police are working with the FBI, and they continue performing DNA tests with ever-improving technology. Anyone with information on this case is encouraged to call the Clinton Township Police at the number on screen. On the weekend of August 24th and 25th of 1991, 20-year-old Marina Ruggiero was planning to attend the wedding of a family friend named Raquel Mezin with her parents John and Maria, as well as her sister Carmela. The wedding venue was located in the idyllic California town of San Luis Obispo, which is close to the ocean and boasts stunning mountain backdrops. The beautiful town was known for attracting tourists, and nobody was ready for what happened on that fateful weekend in 1991. The Ruggiero family booked adjoining rooms on the third floor of the Cuesta Canyon Lodge, which would soon become a scene of nightmares. Marina herself was described as quiet and reserved. She loved nature and was very humble. Her aunt once described the family as traditional Italian, a very emotional, very loving, talk-with-your-hands kind of family. Marina was involved in a romantic relationship with a young man named Greg, who was on vacation in Mexico at the time. Greg said that Marina was the love of his life and they had discussed marriage. Marina worked as an office manager at a company called Lens Technology, and she was taking night classes at El Camino Community College in Torrance. On the evening of August 25th, Marina attended the wedding reception across the street from the hotel, and by all accounts the night went very well. Marina celebrated with everyone, dancing and catching up with friends and family. At around 9 or 9:30 p.m., she told her family that she was going to return to the hotel briefly to change before returning to the group for a smaller scale get-together. Marina went back to the hotel, but she never returned to her family. At around 11 p.m., they decided to check on Marina. The door to the room was locked and nobody was answering, so they went down to the lobby to get another key. They entered the room to find Marina's body laid out on the bed with a towel covering her face. She had been stabbed multiple times in her upper body. The family started trying to resuscitate Marina and the authorities were contacted. Paramedics arrived on scene and transported her to the nearest hospital, but Marina succumbed to her injuries. The detectives who ended up taking the case said that they were frustrated by the fact that the crime scene had been compromised. The chaos that Marina's family and the paramedics had stirred up had accidentally contaminated the crime scene, which caused even less evidence to be available, and there was already very little evidence to work with in the first place. There were no weapons at the crime scene and nothing had been stolen. There was a cloth rag near the body, which suggested that Marina had been gagged. Pry marks on the door raised important questions. Did the killer break into the room to wait for Marina, or did they follow her from the wedding? There were no eyewitnesses to the murder or any reports of suspicious activity. An autopsy was performed, which confirmed the numerous stab wounds to Marina's upper body, including one wound from the knife piercing her heart. The time of death was estimated to be between 9:30 and 10 p.m., meaning that Marina was murdered shortly after returning to the room. There was no evidence of SA despite her skirt and top being removed. Evidence suggested that the killer had grabbed her from behind, which caused the investigators to speculate that the killer had waited in the bathroom for her to change, then emerged when she was most vulnerable. The family attorney also stated that they do not believe Marina knew her killer. Nobody had left the wedding with her, and none of the guests were ever suspected. The case eventually went cold with a lack of evidence and leads. The detectives were hopeful that the killer may have left some DNA behind at the crime scene, but no such DNA was ever found and no suspects were ever named. The Ruggiero family ended up suing the hotel for its failure in security. Some people have speculated that the killer was either an experienced murderer or a member of the hotel staff. The murder was bold and fairly efficient, leaving behind minimal evidence and no witnesses. It's possible that the perpetrator had killed before, or otherwise they were familiar with the hotel staff and procedures. Despite this hypothesis, none of the hotel staff members were ever named as suspects. Another theory is that a random person noticed Marina leaving the wedding and decided to act on impulse. This person could have followed her to the hotel room and pounced when they got inside. There was a pedestrian bridge near the wedding venue that ends with a clear view of the venue, and this could potentially have been where the killer spied Marina from. This hypothesis has also never been confirmed. There are some other interesting, if extremely disturbing, aspects of this case. For one thing, it seems clear that the motivation of the murder was not sexual. It also doesn't seem as if there was any personal connection between the killer and their victim, which could suggest that the killer's motivation was purely for the thrill of committing murder. It's possible that the perpetrator was a legitimately sick individual with a twisted desire to end someone's life, thus causing a joyous wedding to end in tragedy. However, other people have argued that, despite what the police think, the killer may have actually had a personal connection to Marina. The towel that was covering her face at the time of her discovery may have been used to cover her features as a means of creating a sort of emotional distance between the killer and the victim. On the other hand, some people have suggested that the towel was simply a means of preventing any forensic evidence from getting on the body. At the end of the day, Marina's brutal murder remains unsolved, and the killer was either extremely lucky or extremely competent at taking lives. Hopefully the case will be solved before long, but that doesn't seem likely.
Click the join button to become a member today. Channel members receive exclusive content as well as early access to all my content.
On December 21st of 1982, 12-year-old Stephane Gauthier and two of his friends walked to a business called Canadian Tire in Montreal to purchase a present for his friend's father. On their way back home to his friend's house, they were followed by 3 people in a white van. The children became very worried and they picked up the pace, making it home quickly. They ate dinner together and Stephane left his friend's house at approximately 6:30 p.m. to meet up with his mother and stepfather at a different friend's house a few blocks away. However, Stephane never arrived at the second friend's house. A search for the young boy soon began, and he was found 2 days later. Stephane's dead body was discovered in a field in an industrial park about 12 kilometers away from his friend's house. He was completely naked and had been essayed. The cause of death had been strangulation with his own gray turtleneck. Stephane's pocket money had been left behind. The Montreal authorities have been criticized for the way they handled Stephane's case. They did not have a user-friendly website and they didn't do much posting on social media, which meant that they received very few tips. The investigation stalled and never recovered, causing the case to go cold and the perpetrators to walk free. No suspects were ever named, although Stephane's sister has since stated that it's possible Stephane knew his killer. According to his sister, their family had a history of questionable relationships, and 2 of Stephane's uncles were arrested for sexual abuse sometime after his murder. The police allegedly investigated this angle, but nothing came of it. Stephane's sister has also pointed out the similarity of her brother's murder to 3 other murders in the general vicinity. Maurice Fiennes, Wilton Lubin, and Sebastien Metivier were all young boys who had been kidnapped off the street, essayed, and murdered in a nearby neighborhood about a year and a half after Stephane's murder. It's possible that the killers were the same people in each case, but this hypothesis remains unconfirmed. Stephane Gauthier's murder is still unsolved to this day, and anyone with information on the case can contact the Montreal Police Department at the number on screen.